And we're live. Blake, awesome to see you.
Always good to see you, Dominic. I did just want to point out one thing to the viewers. We're recording on Dominick's birthday today. And if that doesn't highlight how much he's committed to this industry, I don't know what does. So happy birthday, Dominic.
I'm a 401k nerd. What can I say? This is kind of this.
That's how you want to spend your birthday, man.
Excited,
That's on
right?
you.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Appreciate the birthday wishes. No, and super excited to dig into our content today. In our previous show, we were looking at different aspects of benchmarking and retirement plan, and today we're going to be zooming in on the retirement plan features. I feel like this is definitely something that can be overlooked in terms of how you can really tailor a 401k plan to make sure it aligns well with your organization goals, with what you want to have happen to support employees and their decisions about their retirement and their future. So super excited to dig into it. So Blake, I'm going to pass it to you and how you kick us off.
Absolutely. And I think the common thing when we talk to prospects and clients is everyone cares about fees and investments.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think those are very important topics when you're benchmarking your company or organization's retirement plan. But a lot of times what gets overlooked is, what about the design? Like, how's the plan operating? When's the last time you even reviewed that? So what we're going to discuss in the next 15-ish minutes is some of the key areas that when we get into a prospect meeting, we find a lot of times that are errors. And it's just as important as picking the right investments and making sure you're paying up to industry standards and fees. So I'll start off two things that I always come across, and I think you would agree, Dominic. One is the ERISA bond. I can't tell you how many times I bring on new clients and with you as well, and they're like, what's an ERISA bond, right? And a lot of times if you set up a new plan recently or you were a newer plan not too long ago, it gets overlooked. Now, I know the ERISA bond itself may not cause a disqualification of your plan, but it is absolutely a compliance requirement. So just to give a refresher, every time you set up a 401k, 403b, an ERISA retirement plan, you do have to set up a fidelity bond to protect the plan assets. It doesn't have to be dollar for dollar in the valuation of the insurance, but it does have to be a minimum of 10% of the plan assets. Even if you start a new plan with no money, we typically say start with around 50,000, 100,000 in coverage, because that would cover you up to until the plan gets to 500,000 in assets or even $1 million. But just keep in mind, I've seen it one too many times. I think you have too, Dominic, where clients don't even know what an ERISA bond is, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's one of those easy things to overlook. And one thing to clarify, the IRS does require that 10% up to 500,000, right, Blake?
You're absolutely right. That's the maximum. So if you have a $5 million plan, 500,000 covers it. But if you have a 10 million, you don't have to go to $1 million. 500,000 is okay.
Yeah.
There's also nuances if you ever try to put in real estate or some non-qualified asset into the plan that does require different stipulations. But generally speaking, easy to set up. Don't overlook it, even if you're setting up a new plan this year. That's one request we have after you've listened to this video.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely something that your property and casualty insurance specialist should be able to assist you with. So
exactly.
It'd be one of those annual checkpoints when you do your insurance review with them.
Yep. And then the other most common I see is clients assuming part-time can be excluded like they can in health benefits. Mm-hmm. I always highlight part-time employees in the eyes of health benefits and medical is a lot different than it is in the 401k. So if you've just been operating your plan assuming you can exclude part-time, just remember, you can't just exclude employees because of hours. There are certain hour requirements, and the IRS and DOL have even doubled down on how much that employee has to work before they're eligible. So if you're listening to this and you think, well, we don't even include our part-time in the benefit, if the document doesn't have some type of language around that, you may not be operating your plan properly. And we see that one too many times. So those are the two key things that I always see when we look to like be consultants and take over a plan from a benchmark perspective.
Yeah.
Great. Now we're going to actually get into some illustrations because this is another common theme that we see a lot is setting up the plan for a proper plan design. So as Dominic pulls up here, some case studies we've done recently, you'll see design makes a huge difference, not from the satisfaction of employees or the owner, but also from a company's perspective and what you're maybe on the hook for to really open up the plan for high limits for your owners. So what you're looking at is a plan that was already set up when we started talking to them. And as you kind of scroll your eyes, I know there's a lot of numbers here, but really for this group, it was owner and his wife, and then their employees. They didn't really get a consultant to help them set up the plan. they kind of went through the checking the boxes. And we may have all heard of a safe harbor, right? And the keys to a safe harbor plan is it safe harbors you from the non-discrimination testing. So in a safe harbor match, it's nice. As you can see here, the owners can put in the $23,500, and then they just offer up to a 4% match, dollar for dollar. As long as they offer it, they can max out the plan for themselves, and they don't have to worry about non-discrimination testing. But the key and why we bring this up is, yes, safe harbor match is great, but the owners also were doing profit sharing. And I can promise you 99% of the time, if you work with a payroll that also does 401ks, or if you work with bundled, no advisor on the plan type setups, they're going to default to the safe harbor match and a pro rata profit sharing. Pretty straightforward. Pro rata, whatever you give the owners, you give to the employees. Caveat here, the owners were happy with it. They got to max out. They got the 4% match, as you can see on the illustration. And then they also were able to do an additional 10% profit sharing to themselves. But because of that pro rata design, they had to give all their eligible employees a 10% contribution as well. Owners were happy, right? So maybe this applies to you as well today. Maybe you're like, this is fine. But if no one's really talking to you about the unique designs that you can bring to the table, they may be leaving money on the table for their business. So in this perspective, they got the 4% match themselves. They gave everyone 10% pro rata profit sharing, and they got to about $55,000 in tax deferred contributions for themselves as owners. But they also had to give, close to 60 grand to their employees. Now, pro rata. Well, what if we looked into doing a more advanced plan design, right? And that's where we kind of showed them at first. So as you go to the next illustration, we didn't change the match. You still offer the dollar for dollar up to 4%. But now we can use this advanced plan design that we can put into the plan document. And what it really does is it allows you to take into consideration owners' age, their income thresholds, and that time horizon to retirement, and really skew profit sharing contributions in favor of the owners over the employees because of that age and income discrepancy. So all still the same, all variables the same, going from a pro rata profit sharing to now a new comparability cross-tested profit sharing. You'll see we only had to give the 4% match, but then we were also able to give the owner and his wife 23% contribution and only had to give the employees an additional 5%. So now they went from giving 10% to themselves and 10% to all their employees to now being able to get a 23% contribution with only having to give 5%. I'll pause there, Dominic. That's pretty significant, right? You went from everyone getting 10% to when now we can skew that in favor of the owners and only have to pull out of the budget of the company a 5% additional contribution to your employees. That's pretty significant savings from a company's perspective, if you ask me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's certain cases where, the owners are, trying to max out everything they can, get themselves prepared and ready for retirement, and then, plans to, transition the business on. And there's other cases where they're okay with giving that more generous match and contribution to staff members. Like, there's not necessarily a single wrong or right answer here. It's really about understanding and clearly defining the goals for the organization, the goals for the plan. And, there is an opportunity to use this as a way to retain that, top key talent, right? So just understanding the different options that you have, I think is super important.
Exactly. And the caveat to all this, if you were comfortable giving your employees 10%, that's fine. But in the previous design, you were only able to get 10% yourselves. Right. We're just showing you only had to give everyone a minimum of 5%. If you wanted to give some specific employees a little bit higher because of their work ethic and what they do for the company, you can give some of these still 10%, but as long as you give everyone that minimum 5%, you can still open up to maxing out this plan as an owner. And that's significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd say most good TPAs know this cross-tested formula, right? Most of your bundle providers will not, and they don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the time to look at the numbers and look at the census. But this is where true consultants like Dominic and I can really dive in and see what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. But I say all that to tee up to the third illustration, which is what they ultimately went with. So they were already used to giving all their employees the 4% match, right? And now with auto enroll rules, meaning you have to automatically enroll employees, they have to opt out. Everyone was already participating, so they were already getting that 4% match. But if we knew that, and they're already okay giving that 4% match, and they have the 100% participation, why not look at doing a 3% safe harbor non-elective, meaning they don't have to put in as an employee to get it, you give it across the board. Well, if you do this 3% design, look at what the additional profit sharing you have to give the employees. You only have to give another additional minimum 2%, and the owners can still max out to the 77,500. So we went from giving 14% to each of your employees, which is, that's a raise in itself, to now only having to give 9%. But with the right consultants, you technically as owners only had to give your employees 5% to get yourself to that 77,500. So I'll pause there. Does that make sense? Just looking at it as well, Dominick. I know we've done this one too many times, but did we clarify that?
Totally. I think some of the key things to highlight, the difference between the 4% match and the 3% non-elective. With the match, you're only making that contribution as an employer as long as people are putting in at least that 4% into their personal 401k plan. And so if you have, a segment of employees that aren't participating, like that's going to impact your obligation into the retirement plan. Whereas with that 3% non-elective, like every single year, you're putting, those dollars into the plan. But yeah, the way the profit sharing skews is like, there's quite the contrast, which is pretty cool.
And that's the key, right? Working with a team like us, maybe it doesn't make sense, but at least we're going to explore these options. But I'll tell you, Dominick, I'd be surprised if some owners saw this and said, wait, why the heck am I on the hook for a 14% total contribution when I only had to give 5%?
Right.
And again, these are minimums to open it up for the owners. And I'm not saying 401ks are always about the ownership, but a lot of times they're the ones that make the decisions and they're putting the company on the line to make sure they can offer this. So why not give a little bit of favoritism to the owners if the IRS can bless it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's, again, common areas. Obviously, we talked about the ERISA bond and part-time employees. If you're listening to this, please just review that. And if you have questions around it, we're here. But also just from the design perspective, maybe you haven't reviewed it in a while, or you're just, no surprise, 401ks isn't what you do every day. You have to run your business. But just know the right consultative team is going to be able to explore what makes most sense for the business. And I tell you, a lot of owners will prefer to pay 5% total than 14 or 9, right?
Yeah. Now, Blake, what would you say are some of the common trigger points where people and specifically owners should re-examine the plan design that they have in place?
Yeah, I would say, if you're a non-safe harbor and you're running into testing issues every year and the owners or your highly compensated employees are taking refunds the following year, that can become a pain point. If you've just been working with your CPA and you keep swiping a check to Uncle Sam for significant amounts of money when you can really be putting that into your 401k plan for yourself and your employees, I'd explore that. I think those are always two key signs: refunds, or you're continuing to pay Uncle Sam a pretty high bill. Because these are designed obviously as employee retention, employee benefits, but there's also a lot of benefits to the owner and their business as well.
Totally. Yeah, I think one thing I would add to that as well is, oftentimes 401k plans will get set up, when a business is first starting out. And so, the overall employee demographics is going to, for a new company is going to be very different, look very different from an organization that has been around for 5, 10, 15 years. And I still come across plans where they have not changed their plan design for, 10 plus years. And it's like, wait, time out, like your organization has changed, the goals have changed, your demographics have changed substantially. Like, let's break this down. Moreover, if you look at, the industry that the organization is in, one of the amazing tools that I have is, benchmarking software that is industry specific. So if you want to skew your plan to be a little bit more competitive, relative to your peers in your industry, there's data that we have where we can look at, employer contributions, eligibility periods, profit sharing. And so like if you're in that segment and you want to use benefits as a way to attract top industry talent, scale up your business, we can absolutely dig into the components of that. So that way, when you have that HR person out there recruiting and trying to get new employees to come to join your organization, the conversation about benefits in the 401k plan is going to be different because, like, hey, we've thought this through. We want you to join our organization. We're going to be investing in you, and so because we want you to be with us for the long term, right? Yeah. So I think all of those different components are very essential when trying to put together a very competitive and effective 401k package for your staff.
Well said. And I think a lot of times this isn't discussed because a lot of times advisors on plans aren't 401k specialists, right? And maybe this isn't their forte, and that's okay. But if you get to a point where there are a lot of advantages you're not taking advantage of, we'd love to have a conversation.
Yeah. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, so benchmarking fees and investments, but let's not forget about plan design, because there's a lot you can save or make better through a proper plan design as well. So
yeah, no, absolutely. An absolute critical step to offering quality offering for staff members. So thanks so much for the amazing conversation today, Blake. Really appreciate your expertise as always. And again, if any of you are watching this and you haven't evaluated, the design of your plan, we're happy to help however we can. So,
and we do it for free. So you don't have to sign up. We just ask for some preliminary data. And if you're interested, again, we don't charge to do it. So
yeah. Excellent.
Awesome. Well, happy birthday, Dominick. Always a pleasure. And we'll see our viewers on the next episode.
All right. Thank you, everyone.